So if you live in New York or California and you're thinking about moving to Austin, it's full. They're not letting anyone else in. I'm just kidding. I moved from New York 2 years ago and I love it here. In this video, I'll quickly tell you why I would recommend living here and why it's things that you haven't heard about yet. So I moved to Austin in November 2018 after 7 years of living in New York City. So I got in before the pandemic rush. Now, if you had told me in early 2018 that I would be moving to Austin by the end of the year, I would think that you had me confused with someone else because New York was awesome. It was such a cool city. My dream growing up was to live in New York. When you're young and starting out, it is an incredible city because it forces you to hustle. No one that I spent time with in New York was there by accident. And that's the type of energy that you're around because you can't just lay around and do nothing. You have to be young, you have to be ambitious, you have to get up because the rent is very expensive and you have to go out and hustle every single day. And when you're starting as an entrepreneur, that is a really great experience to be around. I once heard that living in New York was like being in an abusive relationship with the coolest person in the world. So that is what the daily life is like. You always have to hustle. There's so much grit, there's so much friction every single day, but you get up and you do it because it's such a cool city to live in. Someone once told me that they would only leave once that they felt like they made it. And this works until you realize that the goalposts for what that meant would constantly change. So for me, I felt like I'd plateaued in New York. I wasn't really feeling fulfilled or creative. I wasn't going deep. It was very surface level and I was just in the hectic lifestyle. And that's another thing about New York is once you're in any way successful, you just get invited to things and you end up going out and doing all the things, but not doing the work that got you to where you're at today. So that's where I felt like I was gone and not doing the deep work that I needed to be doing. And I was seeing that the business was suffering just from the lack of focus and the constant FOMO of everything going on that was not important to what I should be working on. But society will teach you that you should go to this party or you should go to this thing because you look successful. I was a big believer, if you can make it there, you can make it anywhere, and it's totally true. So I had no intention of leaving, hadn't really even thought about it, but when my girlfriend at the time brought up applying to a job in Austin, it was out of the blue. We'd never discussed leaving the city before. And just like that, a switch flipped and I said, oh, I could live in Austin because I traveled to Austin a bunch. I'd been there a bunch for work. I knew a bunch of entrepreneurs there. We didn't overthink it. I think right after having that conversation, it probably took us like 2 or 3 months to wrap things up and then we moved. Now, after 2 years of living here, I love it even more than I thought. And I'll tell you some reasons why. Number one, Southern hospitality. It's really a thing. People are really friendly here. Lower cost of living. So yes, it's lower than New York City. It's getting higher in Austin just because the pandemic rush, but the quality of life is so much richer. The third reason is an environment for creating deeper friendships. I'm gonna get into that in just a second. And number 4 was work-life balance. So just like I said, I was doing a lot of surface level work. I wasn't going deep on everything. I was going out a lot. And since I've moved to Austin, I've been more productive. I've had a much better social life and I've had better relationships because of just being in this new place. Go back to Southern hospitality. I'll tell you a little bit about Southern hospitality and then New York City hospitality. So the first week that I got to Austin, I broke my collarbone during a charity bike ride. And an Austin acquaintance that I once met at a conference heard about my injury and brought me over a care package. He had home-cooked wheat butter and bone broth protein. And if that's not the most awesome thing you've ever heard, I don't know what is. Now, why is the environment for relationships better? Because yes, there's more people in New York City, but in New York City, everyone is busy. So you may only see good friends once or twice a month. And this means that you're always in catch-up mode. So instead of going deeper in your friendship, you're always being like, oh, what'd you do over the next month? And instead of going deep on specific things, because you already know everything that's going on, you are just always catching up. And I don't believe that catch-up mode is good for deepening relationships. In Austin, because it's smaller, you're more likely to bump into people and get together last minute. You'll also spend more time in your homes together, cooking meals, playing games, spending quality time. Whereas in New York, you might be in a loud, crowded bar yelling over each other because your apartments are too small to hang out in. In general, everything is cheaper and bigger in Texas. Texas has no state or city income tax like we had in New York. I save around 13% without doing anything really differently, and that doesn't take into account cheaper rent or cheaper groceries or things like that. Now, I don't really believe in letting tax dictate where you live, so that's not why I moved, but it is a nice bonus. I have been more productive in the last 2 years than I was in the last 2 years living in New York. And what's better is I feel more connected to the people in my life, to my friends, to my partner, to creating a space for myself. So just having more time alone and going for walks and being in nature. I didn't really have that when I lived in the city. So being out of the hustle and bustle has allowed me to sort of shut out the noise, find signal in my work and in the rest of my life. And that's been incredible. I don't know that I would have been able to deal with all of the ups and downs of business over the last 2 years if I didn't have the space and the freedom that I've had in Austin. And if you want to know more about that, I've talked about the embezzlement and the business partner stuff. I dealt with all of that when I was in Austin, and I'm so happy that I was here because I don't know that I would have dealt with it as well if I was dealing with all of the noise living in the city. Thanks for watching this video. If you are one of the many people that have moved to Austin, great to have you here, and I will meet you at Levercraft Coffee on Saturdays.